In the warm, hushed hours of evening, when the sky softens into shades of gold and rose, there is a corner of the world where the ocean seems to breathe. The waters are calm, the winds are low, and the islands stretch across the horizon like stepping stones laid out by time itself. This is Southeast Asia, a vast shimmering seascape of tropical coasts, river deltas, monsoon winds, and ancient maritime kingdoms that once thrived upon the gentle rhythms of the water. Tonight, we drift quietly into that world, a world where ships sailed not in haste, but in harmony with the seasons, where kingdoms did not sprawl across continents, but flowed from island to island, linked by wooden boats, coral reefs, and shared stories carried on warm sea air, where the day began with the sound of waves against sand, and evenings closed with lantern light flickering over calm harbours. For the next hour and a half, we will follow the slow, dreamlike pathways of the ancient maritime kingdoms, the people of Funan, Srivijaya, Champa, and Majapahit, and the many smaller harbours and island communities that filled the tropical seas with life. We will wander through river deltas, thick with mangroves. We will drift between islands dusted with mist. We will stand at the railings of wooden ships as they follow the monsoon winds, and we will walk through quiet markets where sailors, monks, and travellers once exchanged stories as easily as they exchanged goods. This is not a tale of battles or conquest. It is a story of wind, water, and connection, a peaceful journey across oceans that have carried human footsteps, hopes, and dreams for thousands of years. So as you settle in, let your breathing soften, let your shoulders ease, let your attention drift like a boat carried by gentle tides, and allow the calm, maritime world of ancient Southeast Asia to unfold around you, softly, slowly, like the turning of a warm ocean tide. Tonight we begin our journey where the sea meets the sky, in the quiet shimmering waters that once held some of the most peaceful kingdoms on earth. The story of the maritime kingdoms begins with the sea itself. If you could rise above the world, slowly drifting upward until the earth becomes a mosaic of colours and shapes, you would see something special in this region. A vast scattering of islands, thousands of them, stretching from the Bay of Bengal in the west to the far edges of the Pacific Ocean in the east. Some are small, no bigger than a cluster of palm trees growing upon a ring of sand. Others are immense, green mountainous worlds of their own, wrapped in forests and rivers, alive with the scent of rain and earth. Between these islands lie warm, tranquil seas. The South China Sea shimmering with turquoise and pale jade. The Strait of Malacca, narrow and calm, where ships drifted on gentle tides. The Java Sea, dotted with fishing boats and coral reefs. And the vast expanse of the Sulu and Celebes seas, where deep waters fade into endless blue. Here the ocean is not a barrier, it is a road. For thousands of years, long before any kingdom rose or fell, people in this region lived with the water, not beside it, but within it, as part of its rhythm. They travelled by canoe between islands. They fished along the reefs. They read the wind, the clouds, the flight of birds. They learned to navigate by the feel of the waves, the pull of currents, and the pattern of stars. The sea shaped everything. It shaped food, culture, religion, language, and the movement of people. And it shaped the rise of the maritime kingdoms. But before these kingdoms fully formed, there was one other force that guided life across this vast region: the monsoon winds. In Southeast Asia, the year follows two long breaths of the wind. For half the year, the monsoon blows gently from the southwest. Warm Indian Ocean winds drift toward the Asian mainland, carrying moisture, clouds, and the promise of rainstorms. Ships would lift their sails and drift northeast, guided by steady breezes that felt almost like a hand placed softly against their backs. For the remaining half, the winds reversed. Now they flowed from the northeast, cool and steady, guiding ships back the other way. This simple rhythm, wind going one way, then the other, became the heartbeat of maritime Southeast Asia. Sailors planned their voyages around it, merchants trusted it. Kingdoms grew wealthy because of it. A ship leaving India in June might quietly cross the Bay of Bengal with the southwest monsoon at its side, reach the Malay Peninsula, and drift through the calm waters towards Sumatra or Vietnam. Months later, when the winds reversed, that same ship would return home by following the opposite breeze. It was as though the ocean itself had built a two-way highway, one lane for each season, and the maritime kingdoms grew along this natural route, like lanterns lit along a nighttime path. Imagine standing on the deck of a ship in this world. The sea is warm, the sky is pale blue, the wind is steady, constant, unhurried. There is no hurry, no rush, no urgency, only the slow, comforting rhythm of travel guided by a seasonal whisper. This is the world in which the ancient maritime kingdoms rose, a world shaped by calm seas, predictable winds, and the soft exchange of culture carried from island to island. Long before ships with sails crossed these waters, small wooden boats travelled between islands. Some reached as far as Taiwan and Okinawa, others followed the southern coast of China. Still others drifted from mainland Southeast Asia into the archipelagos of Indonesia and the Philippines. These early seafarers didn't travel with maps. They read the world itself. They watched the patterns of waves breaking on distant reefs. They knew which stars rose above particular islands. They understood that certain birds flew out to sea in the morning and returned at dusk, revealing where land must be. They followed the smell of rain carried over the ocean. They interpreted the shape of clouds and the colour of light reflected off shallow waters. Their journeys weren't rushed. Travel was slow, peaceful, guided by long experience and gentle intuition. Over centuries, these small journeys became larger ones. Island communities grew, trade began, and eventually kingdoms arose, not as massive land empires but as delicate networks of coasts, harbours, and islands held together by water. The first of these early powers lay in the deltas of the Mekong River. This is where we now drift next. Slowly, calmly, toward the ancient maritime kingdom of Funan, one of the earliest coastal societies in the region. As our journey continues, the warm coastline draws inward, and the landscape begins to shift. Before us lies a vast and gentle world of water, the Mekong Delta, where hundreds of slow-moving rivers branch and divide like the roots of an ancient tree. Here, land and water are woven so closely together that it is sometimes impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. This is where the kingdom of Funan emerged more than 1,500 years ago, and though its history is wrapped in mystery, the atmosphere of this place remains unmistakable. Calm, fertile and full of quiet life. Imagine drifting in a small wooden boat along one of the delta's many waterways. The water is warm and still. Green rice fields stretch out across both sides. Palm trees sway gently overhead. Birds glide across the canals, disappearing into mangroves heavy with leaves. This is the world that shaped Funan. Not a world of walls or fortresses, but a world of shifting rivers and peaceful lagoons. A world where the sea flowed inland, and the land flowed out to sea. Unlike great land empires that rose with armies and marched across mountains, Funan grew quietly. Its villages clustered along rivers. Its markets sat on wooden platforms built above the water, and its life revolved around boats, small narrow vessels that slipped silently through the delta like shadows. People fished in calm channels. Farmers tended rice fields that shimmered like silver in the morning sun. Merchants paddled gently from village to village, carrying pottery, spices, textiles, and stories. Funan's strength wasn't in conquest, it was in connection. Merchant ships from India drifted into its harbours when the monsoon winds turned in their favour. Small coastal boats sailed north toward what is now Vietnam. Others drifted southward along the Gulf of Thailand to meet even smaller ports tucked away behind forests of mangrove and bamboo. And all the while, Funan grew richer, not in gold, but in culture. Indian merchants brought early Buddhism and Hindu imagery. Local artisans blended these styles with their own traditions. Ships brought writing, ideas, and quiet new rituals that slowly mixed into daily life. The kingdom did not spread outward in dramatic waves. it blossomed inward, like a lantern glowing softly across the delta. If you visited Funan in its golden age, you wouldn't find vast cities made of stone. Instead, you would see a network of wooden markets built upon stilts, hovering above the water. In the early morning light, these markets would come alive. Merchants arriving by boat would tie their vessels to slender posts. Farmers from nearby villages would bring baskets of rice, coconuts, bananas, and vegetables. Fishermen would lay out their catch of the day. River fish shimmering like wet metal, crab baskets dripping with water, and small shrimp wriggling in woven traps. The air would be filled with gentle sounds, not shouting or chaos, but the soft thump of boats bumping gently against wooden docks, the splash of paddles, and the rhythmic creaking of wooden planks warming under the rising sun. Travellers from outside the region would find a world where everything moved at the speed of water, slow, calm, unhurried. And in this easygoing environment, Funan became one of the earliest maritime societies to act as a bridge between distant worlds, India to the west, China to the north, the island networks to the south, and the coastal peoples of mainland Southeast Asia all around. Every strand of this web met in Funan's quiet, watery heart. In the early centuries of the Common Era, religious ideas travelled along the same routes as the spices and pottery. Some arrived from India, carried by monks who came by sea. Some were absorbed from neighbouring cultures. Some evolved naturally from local spiritual practices. In Funan, this blending happened not in grand temples of stone, but in smaller shrines made of wood and earth. Imagine a simple riverside shrine, a small platform raised above the water with a few carved figures resting beneath a canopy of palm leaves. There might be an incense bowl, its smoke drifting slowly toward the river's surface, or a small lantern glowing softly at dusk. Here religion was not an institution, it was an atmosphere, something felt in the movement of water and the gentle routine of daily life. Buddhist monks sometimes travelled along the waterways, carrying baskets of scrolls wrapped in cloth. Hindu imagery appeared on pottery, jewellery, and everyday objects. Local animist practices honoured the spirits of rivers, forests, and rice fields. Everything blended gently and naturally, like colours swirling together in a quiet painting. Chinese records, some of the earliest written descriptions of Funan, describe a place full of waterways, boats, and soft abundance. They wrote of merchants arriving from distant lands, and of people wearing garments woven from the tropical plants. They described houses built above water and markets busy with trade. They mentioned rulers who travelled not by horseback or chariot, but by boat. To visitors from faraway inland empires, Funan must have seemed like a kingdom floating on water, a place where movement was slow, where distance did not feel like separation, and where the sea was as familiar as the earth. This gentle, fluid world helped set the foundation for all the maritime kingdoms that would follow. But while Funan thrived in its river delta home, another kingdom, far to the southwest, was rising upon deeper waters, a kingdom of harbours, islands, and spiritual travellers, a kingdom that would become the heart of maritime Southeast Asia. We now drift towards Srivijaya, the great island empire of Sumatra. As our journey continues, the landscape shifts once again. The quiet rivers of Funan slowly fade behind us, and the sea opens up into a vast warm expanse. We drift southward, carried gently by the monsoon winds, toward one of the great islands of Southeast Asia, Sumatra. Sumatra is long and mountainous, wrapped in forests that stretch from the coast to the high interior. Its western shores rise sharply from the ocean in steep cliffs and dense jungle, but its eastern shores, facing the Strait of Malacca, are softer, lined with calm harbours, muddy river mouths, and stretches of lowland coast where boats could glide inland with ease. It is here that the kingdom of Srivijaya quietly blossomed. Over 1,000 years ago, travellers approaching Sumatra would have seen what you see now. A horizon shimmering with heat, a wide bay cut by the mouth of a river, and small wooden ships drifting peacefully near the shore. The sea here feels different, heavier with humidity, but soft and warm, like water that is soaked in sunlight. This stretch of coastline, quiet and gentle, became one of the most important maritime crossroads in the ancient world. Not because of conquest, but because of calm connection. Srivijaya was less a kingdom in the traditional sense, and more a vast network of harbours, river mouths, and coastal towns linked by the rhythm of the sea. Its heart lay along the Musi River, near modern-day Palembang, a place where fresh water and seawater mingle in a shifting dance, forming channels, lagoons, and quiet pools lined with palms. Imagine drifting inland along one of these waterways. The air is thick with the scent of vegetation. The water is calm and brown from soil carried downriver. Wooden houses rise on stilts along the banks, their walls woven from palm leaves. Children play in the shallows, splashing softly. Fishermen cast nets that fall over the water like translucent curtains. This is the world in which Srivijaya grew, not as a city of stone, but as an organic, living, breathing water kingdom. At its height, Srivijaya controlled trade routes passing between India and China. But this control was gentle, more like hosting a crossroads than commanding an empire. Ships from distant lands would stop here between long voyages, seeking safe water, fresh supplies, and friendly harbours. In return, Srivijaya became wealthy in knowledge, culture, and quiet influence. The Strait of Malacca, a narrow channel separating Sumatra from the Malay Peninsula, served as a natural funnel for ships moving between the Indian Ocean and East Asia. Because this strait was calm, predictable, and sheltered, it became one of the most travelled maritime corridors in history, and Srivijaya sat right at the centre of it. Picture the scene. A ship from India drifts in on the southwest monsoon, carrying textiles, beads, and copper bowls. Days later, ships from China arrive on the opposite wind, filled with silk, ceramics, and small bronze mirrors. Boats from the Indonesian islands bring nutmeg, cloves, and fragrant woods. Local traders arrive with rice, bamboo, coconut oil, fish, and woven baskets. All these vessels gather in Srivijaya's harbours, their sails fluttering gently in the warm breeze. Lanterns hang from the masts. The sound of many languages mixes into a soft murmur. Trade here is not frantic. It unfolds slowly over days and weeks, as travellers rest, repair their vessels, and prepare for the next phase of their journey. Srivijaya's role is simple: provide safe anchorage, provide guidance, and offer hospitality. In exchange, the kingdom prospered quietly for centuries. One of the most peaceful aspects of Srivijaya's story lies not in its trade routes, but in its spiritual life. By the 7th century, Srivijaya had become an important centre of Buddhist scholarship. Monks travelled from all over the region, even as far as India and China, to study in its monasteries. You can imagine a monastery in this environment, a wooden structure shaded by tall trees, paths winding through gardens filled with tropical plants, small shrines holding clay or bronze statues of the Buddha, and quiet rooms filled with scrolls and palm leaf manuscripts. The air is warm, and the breeze carries the scent of river water and flowers. Monks sit beneath trees, reading by lantern light. Others meditate near the riverbank, listening to the soft sound of water moving around the stilts of the building. Srivijaya was not only a harbour, but a haven, a place where spiritual travellers could rest, reflect, and learn. One famous monk, Yijing, travelled from China to India in the 7th century and stayed in Srivijaya for months. He wrote that the kingdom had over 1,000 scholars and monks, and described it as a peaceful, welcoming place where Buddhism flourished. In a world of constant movement, Srivijaya offered a rare gift: stillness. This stillness, quiet, spiritual, and gentle, became as important to the kingdom as its trade. In Srivijaya, daily life revolved around water. People travelled by canoe, bathed in the river, washed clothes in its shallows, and prepared meals on wooden platforms that extended out over the water's surface. Early morning in Srivijaya would begin with soft sounds: the clatter of wooden bowls, the creak of boats tied to posts, the splash of someone stepping into the river, the murmur of a family sharing breakfast, the distant call of birds waking in the mangrove forests. Fishermen would push their boats into the river, gliding toward the sea with barely a ripple. Children would gather shells and small fish near the banks. Boat builders would sit on low stools, smoothing planks with slow rhythmic motions. As the sun climbed higher, the heat would thicken and the world would grow quiet again, a midday stillness found in many tropical places. Even the river seemed to rest. In the evening, lanterns hung from homes and boats began to glow softly. Families gathered to eat meals flavoured with coconut milk, lemongrass, ginger, and herbs fresh from the wetlands. Life in Srivijaya was not hurried or harsh. It was shaped by the gentle rhythms of nature, guided by the tides and the seasons. Srivijaya was not a single city, but a tapestry of small communities stretched along the coast. Some stood on river islands, surrounded by narrow channels. Others lay hidden behind mangrove forests. Still others sat at the mouths of rivers that opened into the sea. Together, they formed a loose constellation of maritime settlements, each with its own character, but united by shared waterways and shared rhythms. It was this network, not a centralized capital, that made Srivijaya strong. Wooden bridges connected certain towns. Barges carried goods between harbours. Boats acted as messengers, drifting along the coast with news offerings or ceremonial gifts. The kingdom had no need for walls. The sea itself was both guardian and road. What made Srivijaya unique was not the size of its territory or the grandeur of its buildings. It was the feeling of the place. Srivijaya was a kingdom built on water, wind, movement and stillness and gentle connection. It was the embodiment of the sea's quiet power, not through force, but through harmony. When you imagine Srivijaya at its peak, picture this: a warm coastline glowing in the light of a setting sun, hundreds of wooden boats anchored in quiet bays, palm trees swaying gently in the evening winds, monks chanting softly in distant monasteries, travellers gathering on docks to share stories of voyages across far oceans, and the slow soothing sound of waves lapping at the stilts of homes and temples. This was Srivijaya, a maritime world where commerce, culture and spirituality drifted together like the meeting of calm currents. In time, other kingdoms would rise and fall, but the memory of Srivijaya would linger like the echo of a tide, long after the shoreline has changed. And so our journey continues, carried eastward and northward by soft monsoon winds, toward the next coastal realm shaped by the sea, a kingdom of winds and waves known as Champa. As we drift eastward from the quiet harbours of Srivijaya, the ocean opens into wide, gentle waters. The monsoon wind settles behind us, pushing our vessel steadily toward the long, graceful coastline of what is now central Vietnam. Here lies the ancient kingdom of Champa, a realm shaped by sea, wind and the rhythm of maritime life. Unlike the delta world of Funan or the river harbours of Srivijaya, Champa grew along a line of coasts, stretching like a slender ribbon between mountains and sea. The land rises steeply inland, forming hills and ridges covered in green forests, but along the shore the coastline opens into bays, lagoons and sandy beaches that glow softly beneath the tropical sun. This is where Champa thrived. A kingdom built on salt air, coastal breezes and the gentle movement of ships following the monsoon winds. In many ancient writings, Champa was called the Land of the Winds. Here, the steady breezes of the South China Sea shaped everything: the design of boats, the layout of villages, the travel routes, and even the timing of rituals. To live in Champa was to live with the wind, to hear it sighing through the palms at dawn, to feel it carry the scent of salt inland, and to watch it ripple softly across the surface of the water at dusk. The Cham people built sleek sailing vessels with curved hulls that cut gracefully through the waves. Their boats were known for their speed and agility, able to travel quickly along the coast or venture farther into open waters when the breezes aligned. Travelling by sea was not an ordeal. It was simply part of life, a gentle, familiar presence, like the passing of seasons. Life in Champa was centred in small coastal settlements. Picture a village at sunrise. Wooden homes stand on posts near the water's edge, their roofs made from palm leaves. Fishing boats rest on the sand, their shadows long in the early light. Women weave baskets or prepare rice in open-air kitchens. Fishermen mend nets with slow, practiced motions. Children run along the shoreline, leaving footprints that the tide slowly washes away. As the day brightens, activity shifts toward the harbour. Boats glide into the bay, carrying fish, pottery, fragrant woods and woven mats. Traders from islands to the south arrive with small bundles of cloves and nutmeg, spices as valuable as gold in distant lands. Sailors repair hulls using tar made from trees that grow along the coast, and merchants gather beneath simple shelters, spreading out goods upon woven mats in preparation for the day's trade. Nothing in these harbours feels rushed. Even the busiest moments carry a softness, as though the sea itself sets the pace. Because of its position between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, Champa became a natural stopping point for maritime travellers. From India came textiles and beads. From China came ceramics and ideas. From Indonesia came spices carried in small fragrant bundles. From the highlands inland came resins, woods and forest goods traded for salt or fish. And from Champa itself came fine pottery, woven cloth and skilled craftsmanship. Travellers wrote of seeing Cham's sailors guiding ships with confidence, riding the wind with ease and navigating the coastline with knowledge passed down through generations. The Cham people were known for being independent, seafaring and deeply connected to their coastal environment. Their boats travelled widely, not as conquerors, but as traders, messengers and explorers. In this way, Champa became a tapestry of influences, woven gently through centuries of peaceful exchange. Unlike the wooden architecture of Funan or the river settlements of Srivijaya, Champa built temples out of reddish-orange brick, structures that still stand today, weathered by centuries of sun and wind. These temples were often placed on hills or near the coastline, where they caught the first light of morning and the last light of dusk. Carved towers stretched skyward like fingers reaching into the warm air. Stone reliefs showed dancers, sailors and deities connected to the sea and the wind. Inside these temples, the atmosphere would have been deeply peaceful, the air cool and dim, light filtering in through narrow doorways, the scent of incense drifting upward in slow curling threads, the distant sound of the ocean echoing faintly through the open spaces. For the Cham people, spirituality blended seamlessly with nature. The wind, the waves, the mountains, and the changing seasons all mirrored in the art and rituals of the temples. Some temples honoured Hindu deities, brought through early links with India. Others held local spirits tied to land and sea. And in later centuries, influences from Buddhism flowed through the region as well. The result was a calm spiritual blend, subtle, atmospheric, and deeply rooted in place. In Champa, stories travelled by water. Sailors returned from long journeys with tales of distant islands, strange sea creatures and coastlines shaped by storms. These stories, passed from one generation to the next, became part of the cultural memory, half history, half legend, all carried along the waves. Imagine a group of Cham sailors sitting around a small fire on the beach at night. Lanterns flicker in the breeze. The tide moves slowly in and out. Stars shimmer above like pinpoints on a vast dark canvas, and someone begins to speak, a tale of a voyage, a storm, a discovery. These moments of storytelling helped maintain connection not only to the sea, but to each other. And this sense of connection, gentle, communal, and rooted in place, was one of the kingdom's quiet strengths. Champa was not a single city-state, but a cluster of small, loosely connected polities spread across hundreds of miles of coastline. Each port had its own character. Some were tranquil fishing communities with shallow wooden docks. Some were bustling markets where sailors traded spices and ceramic bowls. Some were quieter spiritual centres, with temples overlooking the water. Some were shipbuilding hubs where skilled craftsmen shaped hulls from hardwoods. Together, these ports formed a long necklace of coastal settlements, connected by boats that travelled steadily along the wind-driven sea route. Unlike inland empires with massive capitals, Champa had a coastline for a spine, and the sea itself acted as a road. If you want to understand the soul of Champa, imagine standing on a beach near one of its ancient ports. It is late afternoon. The tide is low. A warm breeze moves in from the sea, carrying the scent of salt and distant rain. Small boats drift lazily near the shore, their sails flapping softly in the wind. Waves roll in at a steady, soothing pace. This gentle rhythm, wave after wave, breeze after breeze, shaped daily life. Sailors waited for the right winds. Merchants timed their voyages with the monsoons. Temple rituals were held at dawn or dusk, when the light was soft and the air was cool. Villagers gathered near the shore to share meals, stories, and quiet moments. Champa's strength came not from vast armies or monumental architecture, but from its harmony with nature. The sea was not a challenge to be conquered. It was a partner, a guide, a gentle presence woven into every part of life. Over centuries, Champa changed, transformed, and slowly gave way to new powers rising around it. But the sea remained the same, steady, warm, and filled with quiet life. Today the legacy of Champa endures in its temples, its coastal traditions, and the rhythms of the sea that continue to shape central Vietnam. And so we drift onward, carried by the same winds the Cham sailors once knew, toward our next great maritime realm, the powerful and wide-reaching kingdom of Majapahit, the golden horizon of Java. As our journey continues along the warm currents of the South China Sea, the coastline of Champa slowly fades behind us. The wind shifts, turning gently toward the south, guiding our vessel through the deep blue waters that stretch toward the Indonesian archipelago. The sea here feels broader, almost endless, dotted with small islands that rise from the surface like emerald hills emerging from a field of blue. And then, after days of drifting across these waters, the silhouette of a much larger island appears on the horizon, Java. Java is long and lush, its interior shaped by volcanic mountains, terraced hills, and dense forests. Mist curls around the high slopes in the early morning, and rivers flow down through valleys toward the sea. Along the northern coast, the land softens into wide harbours and fertile plains, places where ships have anchored for centuries and where one of the most influential kingdoms of the maritime world once thrived. This is Majapahit, a realm remembered in legend as the Golden Kingdom of the Indonesian seas. Its story unfolds not in a single city, but across coastlines, river towns and quiet anchorages, all woven into a vast maritime network connected by boats, trade and gentle tides. Tonight, we drift softly into that world. To understand Majapahit, we begin not at sea but inland, where the Brantas River winds slowly through fertile plains. Imagine drifting along this river at dawn. Mist rises from the water in soft curls. Rice paddies stretch out on both sides, glistening like mirrors. Farmers walk along narrow dikes, carrying baskets balanced carefully on bamboo poles. Buffalo move slowly through the shallow fields, their steps stirring peaceful ripples. The air is warm and filled with the scent of earth, water, and young rice plants. Birds call from the trees, their songs echoing gently across the valley. This gentle abundance of the land helped nourish the Majapahit realm. But it was the kingdom's connection to the sea, its rivers flowing outward like open arms toward the ocean, that allowed Majapahit to become a maritime power. From river to harbour, from harbour to island, from island to the wider world, Majapahit's influence flowed outward like tidewater. Follow the river downstream and you reach Java's northern coast, a long warm shoreline where ships from across the region once gathered. Here, small ports bustled with slow, steady activity, wooden piers extending into shallow waters, sailors loading jars of rice, spices and textiles, carpenters repairing hulls under the shade of palm trees, merchants spreading cloth across woven mats, and boats of every size drifting in and out of the harbour, guided by the monsoon winds. But unlike the frantic harbours of large inland empires, these ports moved at a peaceful pace. The monsoon winds dictated the rhythm of trade. Travellers arrived when the winds favoured them, and waited patiently for the season to shift before they continued onward. This natural cycle brought a balance to life along the Javanese coast, and Majapahit grew in harmony with that rhythm. Majapahit is often remembered as a great empire, but this empire did not expand through massive armies marching across continents. It spread softly, through harbours, alliances, and shared waterways. Picture Java during Majapahit's height in the 14th century, lush landscapes glowing in the afternoon light, temples with intricate brickwork rising above treetops, villages nestled between rice fields and rivers, and coastal towns filled with the scent of cloves, nutmeg, ginger, and sandalwood. Inside Majapahit's royal courts, dancers performed slow, graceful movements. Poets recited lines from ancient stories. Musicians played gongs and metallophones whose shimmering tones drifted across open courtyards. But beyond the palace walls, the kingdom's true strength flowed across the sea. Its influence stretched toward Bali, Borneo, Sumatra, the Malay Peninsula, and the smaller islands that dotted the Java Sea. Some places traded willingly. Some became allies. Some simply drifted within Majapahit's gentle gravitational pull. It was a golden age, not of conquest, but of cultural connection. One of the most peaceful and beautiful ideas to emerge from Majapahit's world was the concept of the Nusantara, a term meaning the outer islands, or the archipelago. It described a vast constellation of islands, connected not by borders but by water. Imagine it. Thousands of islands scattered across a warm, shimmering ocean, each one unique, some mountainous, some flat, some sandy, some forested, yet all linked by the paths of sailors, traders, and winds. In the Majapahit worldview, the sea was not something that separated these islands, it was something that joined them. The Nusantara was a maritime world of wandering boats, familiar coastlines, shared stories, and slow-moving trade. This interconnectedness, gentle, flowing, and natural, became a defining feature of Majapahit's identity. Life in Majapahit was grounded in simplicity, community, and nature. Villages rose with the sunrise. The air felt cool and mist clung to the rice terraces. People prepared meals of rice, vegetables, and coconut. Riverboats moved steadily toward the coast to begin the day's trade. Work slowed under the warm tropical sun. In shaded workshops, artisans carved wood, shaped pottery, or wove colourful textiles. Children played near riverbanks. Fishermen cast nets into calm estuaries. Lanterns lit up porches. Families gathered around low tables. Music drifted from small gatherings. Stories of ancestors and ancient voyages filled the night air. The world felt quiet. The steady hum of insects rose. The warm breeze carried the scent of earth and river, and the sea continued its eternal rhythm, lapping gently against the shore. In Majapahit, life unfolded slowly, in harmony with land and water. Majapahit sailors were skilled navigators who followed. Stars that rose over certain islands, cloud patterns that formed above land, the colour of the water, the flight paths of seabirds, the feel of swells rising from distant shores. They did not need compasses. The sea itself was the map. Picture a Javanese outrigger canoe gliding across warm waters. The hull cuts cleanly through the waves. The sail catches the soft monsoon wind. The sailor listens, feels, and watches, and the ocean guides him forward with patient, steady rhythm. This ancient knowledge, subtle and intuitive, carried Majapahit's influence across the archipelago. Majapahit's world thrived on slow, steady trade. The markets near the coast were filled with cloves from the Maluku Islands, nutmeg carried in small woven bundles, sandalwood from Timor, pepper from Sumatra, rice from Java's fertile plains, palm sugar, bamboo, and fresh fruits, pottery decorated with gentle patterns, carved wooden tools and ornaments, woven cloth dyed in deep reds and earthy browns. These goods travelled from island to island in wooden boats, guided by currents and wind. Trade was rarely frantic. It unfolded gradually, shaped by the seasons and the sea. Majapahit eventually softened, faded and transformed, as all kingdoms do, but its influence endured, in stories, in traditions, and in the quiet interconnectedness of the Indonesian archipelago. The legacy of Majapahit is not one of battle or conquest, but of connection, a world where islands shone like lanterns in the sea, where waterways replaced roads, where culture travelled by boat, where the sea was not a boundary, but a bridge. And this golden horizon, warm, peaceful, expansive, remained a soft memory carried forward through centuries. As night settles over the Java Sea, lanterns glow on wooden boats anchored near the shore. Waves roll in softly, the wind quiets, and the world becomes still. Our voyage now turns toward the deeper rhythms of navigation, star paths, and the techniques that guided sailors through this vast maritime world. This is where we drift next. As the golden coast of Java fades into the warm night behind us, we drift into a deeper part of the maritime story, the art of navigation. For the ancient seafarers of Southeast Asia, the ocean was not a place of uncertainty. It was a familiar landscape filled with signs, patterns, and gentle clues that guide them across great distances. Long before compasses or printed charts, sailors knew the sea as one might know a beloved path through a forest. They understood its rhythms, its moods, the way it spoke through waves and wind. To them, the ocean was a map, a living map that changed with the seasons, but always carried meaning for those who listened closely. Tonight, we explore that world of ancient navigation, slowly, softly, drifting deeper into its calm mysteries. Southeast Asian sailors possessed a remarkable skill. They could read the shape and movement of waves as if they were reading words on a page. A long, steady swell often signaled deep open water. Short, choppy waves might reveal a nearby reef or island just beyond the horizon. Waves that split or curl in unusual patterns hinted at hidden sandbars or shifting tides. Some sailors could close their eyes, place a hand on the side of the boat, and feel the rhythm of the ocean, using this alone to sense nearby land. Imagine sitting on the deck of a wooden outrigger canoe. The night is quiet. The stars shimmer above like lanterns. Waves roll gently beneath the hull. The sound is soft, almost musical, a steady rhythmic hush that echoes through the wooden frame of the boat. In that sound, a sailor hears everything he needs to know. While the waves spoke with movement, the stars spoke with light. For thousands of years, sailors memorized the rising points of certain stars, learning which ones appeared above specific islands or coastlines. When the star cluster known today as the Pleiades rose over the eastern horizon, it marked the arrival of new seasons. Other constellations pointed toward familiar trade routes. Still others signaled shifts in weather, tides, or approaching storms. Navigation was not a mathematical practice. It was a relationship, a gentle partnership between human memory and the natural world. Picture a sailor standing at the front of a boat at night. His eyes lift toward the sky. The sea is calm. A warm breeze drifts past. The stars above him wheel slowly across the heavens, tracing silent pathways. Each star becomes a guide, a companion, showing him where he is and where he is going. No force shaped the maritime world more than the monsoon winds. These winds arrive like clockwork, shifting direction every half year. Sailors trusted them more than any landmark. Warm winds blew from the Indian Ocean toward Southeast Asia. Ships sailed northeast, drifting toward Funan, Champa, and China. Harbours filled with travellers seeking to ride the seasonal current. Cooler winds blew in the opposite direction. Ships returned home toward India and Arabia. Trade reversed like the gentle turning of a tide. To live in the maritime kingdoms was to live within this peaceful, predictable cycle. Everything unfolded with patience. Travel, trade, planting and harvesting, storytelling. Even ceremonies and festivals were often tied to the arrival of the monsoon. It was as if the entire world breathed in and out with the movement of the wind. For sailors who travelled between islands, Stars and waves were not the only guides. They watched clouds. Tall towering clouds often formed above land long before the island itself was visible. Flat clouds sometimes reflected the colour of shallow water or coral reefs below. Thin streaky clouds might hint at changes in the wind. They watch birds. Certain seabirds could only fly far from land at dawn before returning by nightfall. Their flight paths revealed the direction of distant shorelines. They watched the light. Sunlight reflecting off the sea changed depending on depth, clarity, and the presence of hidden sandbars. A faint green shimmer might indicate a reef just under the surface. A milky blue showed the presence of shallow sand. A deeper shade of blue signaled deeper waters. Each element of nature, light, wind, cloud, bird, wave, became a soft, quiet signpost. Taken together, they formed a complete navigation system, delicate and powerful. One of the most remarkable sailing vessels ever designed was the outrigger canoe, used across the islands of Southeast Asia and the broader Pacific. Its shape was narrow and sleek. A long float, the outrigger, extended from one side, balancing the boat against the waves. This simple design allowed sailors to travel swiftly, smoothly, safely, and quietly. An outrigger canoe glides through the water with almost no sound. Imagine riding in one at twilight. The paddle dips gently into the water. Droplets fall back like soft raindrops. The canoe moves forward with barely a ripple, and the ocean becomes a mirror reflecting the darkening sky. For thousands of years, these vessels linked islands, families, stories, and cultures across vast stretches of sea. To the ancient maritime kingdoms, the sea was woven with roots as real and important as roads. These roots were not marked on paper. They existed in memory, a chain of landmarks, wind patterns, and star positions. Sailors knew when to leave a harbour, which islands would appear at dawn, how many days to expect between landfalls, where reefs guarded hidden lagoons, which bays offered shelter during sudden storms. These mental maps were passed from teacher to apprentice, from elder to youth, from one generation to the next. Some routes were short, linking neighbouring islands. Others stretched across hundreds of miles, connecting entire regions. Together they formed the quiet architecture of the maritime world. One of the most peaceful aspects of ancient navigation was the culture of waiting. Sailors did not fight against the wind. They waited for the right season, the right tide, the right moment. A journey might be delayed for weeks, not out of frustration, but acceptance. In this waiting, life unfolded softly. Repairs were made to boats, fishing nets were mended, stories were shared by lantern light, children played along the beach, merchants bartered goods beneath palm roofs, monks offered blessings to travellers embarking on long voyages. This patience shaped the personality of the maritime kingdoms, calm, contemplative, and unhurried. Imagine finally a night spent in the middle of the ocean, one of countless nights experienced by the ancient seafarers. The sky above is vast and clear. Millions of stars shimmer like grains of silver scattered across black silk. The sea below is dark and warm, moving in long, slow breaths. The boat creaks gently as it rocks. The sails billow softly. The air carries both salt and stillness. In this moment the world feels endless, but also intimate. The sea becomes a cradle, the sky becomes a guide, and the night becomes a soft, serene companion. This is how journeys unfolded across the maritime world, not in haste or fear, but in deep, dreamlike calm. As we drift further into the night, our voyage turns now toward the daily lives of sailors, merchants, monks, and island communities, the people whose quiet routines shape the rhythm of these maritime kingdoms. As the night sky slowly fades and the first hints of dawn begin to glow along the horizon, the maritime world awakens not with noise, but with gentle rhythm. Before the sun rises fully, the air is cool and damp. Mist gathers around riverbanks and wetlands. Palms sway softly in the morning breeze. The sea lies calm, like a sheet of blue silk stretching endlessly outward. In countless small coastal villages, the first signs of life appear. A fisherman steps quietly from his home, carrying a folded net over his shoulder. A mother stirs rice over a clay stove, the scent of steam drifting into the early light. A group of children runs barefoot across the sand. Chasing the tide's edge, birds call from treetops, their songs echoing gently across the water. This slow unfolding of morning sets the tone for life throughout the ancient maritime kingdoms. Nothing moves abruptly. Nothing begins in haste. The day opens gradually, shaped by the same patience that guides boats through the seasons. Fishing was a cornerstone of daily life in every maritime community, a quiet ritual that repeated itself with comforting familiarity. When the light was still pale, fishermen pushed small wooden canoes into the water. Waves whispered against the hull. The surface shimmered with the reflection of the rising sun. Fishing in these regions was not a frantic task, but a slow, gentle practice. A net cast into shallow water, a moment of waiting, the soft pull of the tide against the boat, and then the careful retrieval of the net, heavy with the morning's catch. Fish glistened like polished stones. Some were small and silver, others were mottled shades of blue, green or gold. The fishermen would sort their catch quietly, placing fish into woven baskets lined with leaves. Then they would paddle back toward the village where the day's trade and meals awaited. For thousands of years this peaceful rhythm shaped mornings along coasts from Vietnam to Indonesia. As the sun rose higher, the heart of coastal life shifted toward the markets, quiet open-air gatherings where people traded goods, shared stories and connected with one another. Markets in maritime kingdoms were simple yet vibrant, wooden stalls shaded by palm leaf roofs, clay jars filled with rice or oil, baskets overflowing with fruits like bananas, mangoes and papaya, spices wrapped in small bundles, pottery with gentle patterns carved into the sides, tools made from bamboo or carved wood, and always the soft murmur of conversation. Merchants from inland forests brought honey, resin and timber. Villagers exchanged fresh fish for baskets or cloth. Sailors offered rare items carried from distant islands, dried nutmeg, cloves, shells, beads, or small carvings made from fragrant woods. The markets were not loud. They were not chaotic. They moved at the slow pace of community, a shared rhythm shaped by familiarity and trust. By midday, the tropical heat deepened, and the world settled into a period of stillness. Sailors who had spent the morning preparing their boats paused to rest in shaded spots along the shore. Some lay in hammocks woven from strong fibres. Some sat on low stools carving tools or repairing sails. Others shared tea made from local herbs, sipping slowly from small clay cups. The sound of the sea grew softer as the tide receded. Palm fronds rustled lightly in the warm breeze. Distant birds soared lazily above the coastline. For sailors, this midday pause was essential. Travelling by sea required patience, rest and careful timing, not force or rush. Their boats were their homes, workplaces and shelters. Maintaining them was as much a part of daily life as preparing food or mending clothing. This quiet care kept journeys safe, and it gave sailors the peaceful connection to their vessels that defined the maritime world. Food along the coast was simple, nourishing and shaped by local abundance. A typical meal might include rice steamed in woven baskets, fish grilled over coconut husks, greens sautéed with garlic, soups flavoured with lemongrass, ginger or galangal, fruit sliced fresh and arranged in small clay bowls. Meals were eaten slowly, often shared with family or friends on low platforms raised just above the ground. This was not a world of haste. It was a world where meals anchored the day, a moment of calm connection before returning to work or preparing for travel. Merchants in the maritime kingdoms lived lives defined by movement, yet their routines were predictably gentle. Many began their day with quiet tasks, organising goods into neat bundles, checking the condition of jars and baskets, preparing small offerings for the journey, updating mental lists of items to trade. Then they would walk slowly to the harbour, where their boats waited. The merchant's boat might be loaded with textiles, dried fish, pottery, or small amounts of spice from faraway islands. Some boats carried messages or letters between communities, others acted as ferries, transporting people from one island to another. Yet even merchants, who travelled more frequently and more widely than most, lived within the calm logic of the monsoon. There was no rushing to meet strict schedules. Travel was dictated by nature and by the rhythms of trade itself. This blend of movement and stillness created a unique serenity in their lives. In maritime kingdoms like Srivijaya and Majapahit, monks and scholars played an important role in cultural life, and their days were filled with deep calm. A typical day might begin before dawn, with meditation in a quiet garden or in a shaded room where lanterns cast soft light upon the walls. Monks would chant softly as the first birds sang in the trees. Then they would study scriptures, write on palm leaf manuscripts, or teach travellers who visited the monastery seeking guidance or knowledge. Some monasteries were located near rivers or harbours, where the sounds of boats passing by became part of the daily soundtrack. Imagine sitting inside a small wooden monastery on a tropical morning. The room is warm but shaded. A gentle breeze drifts through open windows. The soft hum of insects blends with distant voices from the harbour. Scrolls lie neatly arranged on low wooden tables, and a monk moves quietly from one task to another, each motion calm and deliberate. This gentle environment helped make the maritime kingdoms centres of spiritual life as well as trade. As the sun begins to descend, the world changes again. Colours shift from bright greens and blues to warm gold, orange and deep red. The sea becomes smoother, waiting for the night to arrive. Villagers return home with baskets of fish or bundles of rice. Children finish their play along the shoreline. Merchants secure their boats with ropes tied around wooden posts. Evening meals begin, quiet gatherings where families talk softly as lanterns flicker in the dusk. In some villages, music can be heard drifting through the warm air, the gentle ringing of small gongs, the soft tapping of wooden instruments, the distant hum of voices singing ancient melodies. This music blends with the sound of waves to create a serene, dreamlike atmosphere, the perfect backdrop for stories. And stories were abundant. As night settles fully over the coast, communities often gather around fires or lantern-lit porches to share tales of old voyages. Elders would speak of long journeys to distant islands, encounters with strange sea creatures, the night sky during great storms, the discovery of new harbours, and the spirits believed to live in the waves and winds. These stories were not dramatic warnings or grand epics. They were gentle, reflective tales, woven with wonder, humour, and gratitude. In this way, knowledge of the sea passed from one generation to the next. Navigation techniques, weather wisdom, cultural traditions, ancestral memories, all folded into soft stories told at the end of long, peaceful days. Finally, as the last lanterns dim, the maritime world quiets completely. The waves roll in with long, slow breaths. The tide shifts softly under the moonlight. Stars shimmer overhead like ancient companions. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of salt and earth. Boats tied to posts sway gently, their ropes creaking in the night breeze. Villagers fall asleep to the rustling of palm leaves. Sailors rest in small shelters or aboard their boats, listening to the soothing chorus of the sea. Night in the maritime kingdoms is a time of complete tranquility, a peaceful pause before the next day arrives with its soft rituals and gentle movement. And with this stillness, our journey now turns toward the closing chapters of the maritime world, how these kingdoms changed, transformed, and faded, leaving behind echoes on the water that still linger today. Across Southeast Asia, the tides continued their eternal rhythm even as centuries passed. The same warm waters that carried fishermen, merchants, monks, and sailors slowly witnessed the transformation of the maritime kingdoms. Nothing changed all at once. Nothing ended abruptly. Instead, the passing of these seafaring realms felt like the steady alteration of a coastline, softened gradually by waves, reshaped bit by bit, carried forward by currents that never ceased. Just as the sea changes without haste, the maritime kingdoms shifted gently into new eras. As time moved onward, the world beyond Southeast Asia changed. New ports rose far to the west, new merchants crossed entire oceans, and new empires, with their own technologies, ships, and ambitions, began to visit the warm waters of the region. Large sailing vessels arrived from distant horizons. Foreign traders established their own routes and settlements, and the old monsoon cycle, once the quiet heart of the maritime world, grew intertwined with wider global networks. But these changes unfolded slowly. For generations, life in Southeast Asia's harbours remained much the same, nets being cast at dawn, lanterns glowing at dusk, markets filled with baskets of fruit and spices, the wind shifting with its familiar seasonal rhythm, boats moving gently along the same paths their ancestors had followed. Time did not erase the maritime kingdoms, it blended them into the evolving world. In the Mekong Delta, where Funan once thrived, villages continued to flourish among rivers and rice fields, but the old networks of trade shifted northward and southward. Other coastal powers emerged, and Funan's watery heart slowly returned to the calm, agrarian life from which it had risen. What remained was not a fallen empire, but a landscape shaped by centuries of movement. The traces of travellers and ideas carried gently by boats along the delta's branching waterways. Funan became a memory not of collapse, but of origin, one of the earliest sparks of maritime connection. On Sumatra's coast, Srivijaya's harbours continued to shine for many centuries, but gradually, new regional powers emerged. Trade shifted toward other ports, and the once thriving Buddhist centres slowly thinned as monks travelled elsewhere to study and teach. There was no single moment where Srivijaya fell. Instead it drifted, like a boat whose ropes loosen, allowing it to move gently downriver. Villages remained, harbours remained, the rhythm of daily life remained. The spiritual light of Srivijaya flickered softly into history, leaving behind stories of an island realm where peace, learning, and maritime harmony once flourished. Along the long coast of what is now Vietnam, Champa transformed through centuries of interaction with neighbouring cultures. Some port towns grew quieter, others evolved into new forms. Brick temples weathered by sun and salt stood as reminders of a coastal people who lived with the wind as their guide. The Cham sailors continued their traditions. Their language, music, crafts and stories survived through the generations. Threads carried forward even as political landscapes shifted around them. Champa's coastline remained what it had always been, a meeting place between sea and land, between old memory and new life, between the past and the present. The island of Java continued to thrive long after Majapahit's era, but like all kingdoms, Majapahit eventually softened, transformed, and gave way to new cultural forces rising around it. Its temples remained, touched by vines and sunlight. Its river networks continued feeding fertile land. Its stories, songs, and epics endured in quiet traditions. Majapahit became a golden memory, an echo of a world where islands were linked not by boundaries, but by shared seas. Even as the kingdom faded, its influence could be felt in the cultures of Indonesia, carried forward like the soft glow of sunset lingering long after the sun has dipped below the horizon. When the maritime kingdoms shifted, what endured was the sea itself, and the ways people lived with it. The ocean never stopped offering food, travel and connection, rhythm, stories, knowledge, comfort. And even as political structures faded or blended into new societies, the maritime traditions remained quietly alive. Villages still rose before sunrise to cast nets. Boats still drifted between islands as the monsoon winds shifted. Lanterns still flickered in harbours at dusk. Monks still meditated near riverbanks. Children still listened to stories of the sea under starlit skies. It was not the kingdoms themselves that defined the region, but the timeless relationship between people and the ocean, a relationship carried gently across generations. Imagine standing now at the shoreline of any place, touched by these ancient kingdoms, the coast of Sumatra, the deltas of Cambodia and Vietnam, the harbours of Java, the smaller islands dotting the Java Sea and the Gulf of Thailand. The waves that reach your feet are the same waves that once carried merchants from India, Monks from China, sailors from island to island. The wind brushing your face is the same wind that guided outriggers across long distances. The horizon stretching out before you is the same horizon ancient navigators watched each night under star-filled skies. Nothing is lost. Every memory remains, folded softly into the sea. The maritime kingdoms may have changed, transformed, or faded, but the ocean still whispers their stories, in the hush of each wave, and the warmth of each breeze. And now, in the quiet of this journey, we drift toward our closing reflection, a final peaceful meditation on the enduring beauty of Southeast Asia's maritime world. As our long journey draws to a close, we find ourselves once more drifting upon the warm, quiet waters that have carried us through so many worlds. The sea beneath us feels timeless. It is the same sea that once flowed through the harbours of Funan, the same sea that touched the riverbanks of Srivijaya, the same sea that brushed against the windswept coasts of Champa, and the same sea that glittered beneath the golden horizon of Majapahit. All these kingdoms, all these lives, all these voyages, all these stories were connected by this single endless body of water, and as we float here now, listening to its slow, gentle breath, it becomes clear that the sea remembers everything, imagine the faint echoes of all who once lived along these shores, the quiet footsteps of fishermen wading into the shallows before dawn, the low murmur of merchants arranging their goods in lantern-lit markets, the voices of monks chanting softly inside riverside monasteries, the laughter of children running along sandy beaches, the rhythmic creaking of wooden boats tied to harbour posts, the whisper of sails catching the first wind of the season. Each sound drifts upward from the past like a memory rising through mist, and all of it lingers here, in the air, the water, the salt, the tides. Even now, if you listen closely, you can almost hear these echoes blending with the gentle hush of waves. Across all the maritime kingdoms, the sea taught the same lessons. Patience. The winds came when they came, the tides moved when they moved, but life flowed with nature's rhythm, not against it. Connection. Islands, though separated by distance, were joined by shared waters and shared stories. Humility. The sea offered abundance, but also demanded respect. Sailors learned to listen, to observe, to move with quiet care. Wonder. Every horizon suggested something beyond reach, and every journey carried the possibility of new knowledge. These lessons shaped the hearts of those who lived in the maritime world, and they still resonate today. If there is one quality that defined the maritime kingdoms above all others, it was stillness. Not a stillness of inactivity, but a stillness of spirit, a calm acceptance of the sea's rhythm, a gentle pace of daily life, a sense of harmony with wind, water, and sky. Picture a lone boat anchored near a tropical island at dusk. The sea glows gold, mirroring the fading light. Palm leaves sway in the soft breeze. The sky deepens into warm shades of purple and blue. The boat rocks ever so slightly. A cradle on the water. This stillness, this sense of being held by the world, is what the maritime kingdoms knew so well. And it is what you are meant to feel now, as this story brings you gently toward rest. As night settles fully across the region, the sea transforms once more. Stars sparkle above, reflected in the dark water below as though the sky has folded into the ocean. Lanterns glow on distant boats, their lights bobbing gently with the tide. The breeze cools, carrying the faint scent of salt and distant rain. This night sea has watched over countless travellers. It has carried their hopes, their journeys, their dreams. It has guided them home, or onward, or into stories that live long after their time. Tonight, it watches over you as well. You too are drifting now, gently, peacefully, across a quiet ocean that stretches out into the soft darkness. You are safe here. You are held here. You are surrounded by calm. As our voyage approaches its final moments, imagine a tranquil harbour appearing in the distance. It is a place with no name, a harbour of the imagination, shaped from all the peaceful ports we have visited tonight. Its shoreline glows faintly in the moonlight. Its waters are perfectly still, like glass. A small wooden pier extends outward, welcoming and warm. This is where our journey ends, and this is where rest begins. The boat drifts closer, slowing, softening, coming to a gentle stop beside the pier. The night is quiet. The world is easy. You are safe, and the sea continues to breathe its slow, eternal rhythm beneath the stars. Before this story fades completely into silence, a final thought remains. Even as the maritime kingdoms changed, even as centuries passed, the spirit of exploration and connection they created never disappeared. It lives in every coastline shaped by gentle waves, in every island touched by monsoon winds, in every star that guided a sailor home, in every quiet harbour where lanterns glow at dusk, and in every moment when the sea feels like a road instead of a barrier. That spirit endures, calm, steady, timeless, just like the ocean, just like the night, just like this gentle breath of history. Now let the waves carry you the rest of the way. Let the rhythm of the sea ease your mind. Let the warm winds guide you toward calm. Let the soft glow of distant lanterns lead you into stillness. Your journey is complete. Your harbour is here, and all that remains now is rest.